Hey, my name is Jobby, and we're looking at the Robot Paradise RP01 Acoustic Wave, which is obviously a third-party Transformers Generation 1 Soundwave, but I think Robot Paradise is an appropriate name, because this is legitimately one of the best Transformers toys I've had. But before we unlock the gates of heaven, you better lock up the gates to your online privacy. With Surfshark VPN, the sponsor of this video, browsing the web without a virtual private network is like trying to play a cassette without a player. It's visible to everyone how dumb you are. Surfshark keeps all your important information private, secure, and protected. Like your emails, your passwords, your questionable fan art of yourself. Thanks for drawing that. Surfshark VPN also lets you virtually travel the world by changing your IP address. You have a choice of over 3,200 servers in 65 countries. Use that to get better deals online. Some stores change their prices depending on where you're shopping from. There's a link in the description to an article about price discrimination that you really should check out. Or you can use Surfshark to watch region-locked content on Netflix, if you still have Netflix. If you're looking to watch all the Michael Bay Transformers movies, like a completely normal person, I regret to inform you that on American Netflix, none of them are available. Crime against cinema. But switch your location to France, Germany, or the Netherlands, and now you could have an explosive movie marathon. I pray for your sanity. Point is, you won't have to pay for a whole nother streaming service. Surfshark VPN also includes Surfshark Alert, letting you know when your sensitive information's been compromised in any way. It's available to download on iOS, Android, Mac, Windows, Linux, just about everything. So check the link in the description and use my code JOBBY to get 83% off and 3 extra months free. And for this month only, you'll also get Surfshark Antivirus for yet another layer of protection. But if you're fine with broadcasting your stupidity for everyone to see, get on social media. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee. Broadcasting your stupidity for everyone to see. That sounds familiar. Now some of the more attentive viewers might find the box looks kind of familiar. And even when you open up the box, the figure itself features a familiar looking quality control sticker. Robot Paradise is a cooler name than Fans Toys anyway. And of course it doesn't feature a Decepticon logo. Got one of those cartoon accurate janky Decepticon logos. There's no other acceptable sticker. And after attaching the shoulder cannon to complete the look, the painting and the sculpting on this figure is amazing. Incredibly cartoon accurate, beautifully basic. Like you, but I won't judge. This is what I always wanted when I said a long time ago that Transformers Masterpiece figure should be as animation accurate as possible. Little did I know I jinxed myself and we got Love the finish on the paint. It's sort of a semi-gloss, but it's also really durable. Barely any paint chipping here, which is a good indication about the transformation not being too fucky. The only significant area of paint chipping are these little fake Walkman knobs. Ruins the illusion just a little bit. Could have definitely just been separate pieces, but they look great regardless. The look of this guy is executed pretty much perfectly. Even the back. And I know what you're thinking.
Where's this backpack okay? Not up to the front.
Soundwave in the cartoon actually has a prominent backpack, which makes this A-okay. But a little pro tip. Out of the box, it looks like this.
I'm a little teapot, sword and spout.
But thankfully, all you need to do is flip that bottom part out and it looks pretty good. And another positive of the backpack is that it functions like an actual backpack. Weapon storage. Or in this case, it's a battery that transforms into a weapon. No real electronic features, unfortunately. But again, I have to say it all the time, an action figure doesn't need electronic features to be good. It just would have been a little fun. Anyway, you want to extend that, flip out the handle, and that should allow you to pull out the barrel. On a very important side note, this barrel, at least on my copy, was extremely tight, so it was pretty much impossible to pull this out with my fingers. Had to go in there with a screwdriver and push it out from the bottom. Acceptable for some people. You're wrong. So I just went in there with some lube, in this case silicone grease, and lubed it up liberally, which is standard procedure for anything that's too tight. Using lube is not a cheat, remember that. That plugs into his hand, wrap his fingers around that. Pretty good grip. Needless to say, he looks good with the blaster. Not this one, we'll talk about him another day. Of course, his shoulder cannon also transforms into a battery, but there's no reason why you would display him without his shoulder cannon unless you're a godless heathen. As far as I'm concerned, the shoulder cannon is not optional. But what is optional are these replacement parts. A few baggies are included with the figure, so I just put all my accessories in there. And these replacement parts allow you to get a more toy-accurate look. First, you gotta... I suggest the part separator not included. Get in there. And there's a little notch at the shoulder that should allow you to remove the shoulder parts. Part separator again. Oh, fuck. There you go. Down on his legs. Beautiful metallic cherry red knee pads. Pop the knee open, which allows you to remove the face of the knee. Attach the new knee pad. Make sure the red part is facing inward for maximum toy accuracy. And bring in this big old leg part. Plugs in really satisfyingly. Replace these plain shins with these more detailed ones. And finally, the chest. You can fit a lot more in there. We'll get to it. Push on the chest window. Pull it out. And replace it with this new one. That's gonna be kind of a bitch to get out. Looks good, though. Could have used the better sticker, but I don't mind the jankiness because it makes the G1 toy look pretty authentic. And while I much prefer the more cartoon accurate, less detailed look, this guy doesn't look too shabby either. I will not judge you if you decide to display this guy like this. Helps that Soundwave's original toy was one of the few G1 toys that didn't look like ass. I'm just kidding, And now, let's take a slight detour, because this little micro cassette is pretty much its own figure. Case is included and the cassette is included. Looks convincing enough, despite the obvious seam lines and the obvious robo-tits. Did micro cassettes have robo-tits? I don't remember. At least I know what a microcassette is. Child. Speaking of robo-tits, of course you can push this shiny ejection button and the cassette slides neatly into there. Closes up, whoop-de-doo. And I don't mean that sarcastically. This is actually really fun. And you'll notice that there's a lot of extra room in here. Perhaps for another cassette? Links in the description, by the way, for this and for the main figure. But for now, you can shove the current cassette behind this little flap and close that up to get it all the way in. This little white part's actually a spring-loaded button. And this chrome piece is actually a switch that you can lift up. Fun. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And to reset the feature, sometimes you gotta go back and push it in manually, but in most cases, just inserting the tape and pushing it back in resets it automatically. Really nice detail in there too. Looks like a real tape deck. Of course, you can put your weed in there. And of course, that isn't all this cassette can do. You want to be really careful with these parts in the leg. Potentially fragile and they don't plug in all that well. Whoops, was supposed to turn these around this way. And here we have the robot mode of Rumble. Or is it Frenzy? Rumble? Leave it down in the comments. Fibrier! Great looking robot mode, surprisingly proportionate and cartoon accurate. The cassette mode did a great job at compressing the robot because he's actually kind of taller than I expected too. Just a fun little guy. Don't forget to add a Decepticon logo, but his face could use a little more attitude. Thankfully... Oh, fuck! Ooh, you don't want to know what goes under my desk. You get a pair of alternate heads that provide that attitude. The thingies on his back can also be inserted into his fists as a little gun. Adorable. And if we de-transform his arms a little bit, you can attach these included pistons. Push right here and they actually pump. Spring-loaded, and to reset them, you just push that in and lock it. Plugs into the arm stump. Looks fantastic. A great amount of playability here. And that's not even counting the posability. Swivel at the head. Rotation at the arm. Kind of tight there. R moves out. You might have noticed that the shoulder actually extends. R moves out here. A bit awkward. Unfortunately, no bicep swivel. Bend at the elbow. Hinge joint at the wrist. No waist swivel. I don't see why not. There's so much room here. Rotation at the leg. Can't move back that far. A beautiful spread. Thigh swivel. Bend at the knee. Ball joint at the ankle. Every ball joint. Ankle moves up and down. And that ball joint functions as a slight ankle pivot. Not a horrible amount of articulation, especially for the size. But perhaps I have been a bit spoiled because I think it could have been a lot more poseable. Not a big deal. This is essentially a glorified accessory. What we should really be critical of is the main figure. But even then, beautifully solid. Really pleasant experience to hold and play with. Some die-cast metal parts really add to a premium feel, which is appropriate. Joints are tight, the figure is hefty. What a joy it is to pose. Swivel at the head, can't look up that far, and look down that far. Really could have been a ball joint, but it's no big deal. The shoulder cannon can rotate and move up and down, gets out of the way of the head. Rotation at the shoulder. Oh, love the clickiness. R moves out, and if you untab the shoulder part, you can get some backward and forward movement. A butterfly joint, as I would call it. Is that even the proper name for it? Bicep swivel, bend at the elbow, ball joint at the wrist. Every ball joint can move in. Ball joint at the thumb. Every ball joint, of course. Hinge joint at the thumb. Hinge joint, hinge joint, hinge joint at the index finger, and a hinge joint on the rest of his fingers. They're individually articulated. Waist swivel, kinda limited by the backpack, but if you work that ab crunch, it can swivel all the way around. And a quick side story about the waist. A tale about how I almost hated this figure. Very important to note, out of the box, these die-cast metal flaps were not folded down, which caused the figure to have a disturbingly loose waist wiggle. At first, I thought Robot Paradise was getting a bit ambitious with their articulation, which I appreciated for a minute, until the wiggle became annoyingly loose, seeing as this attachment is held by one screwdriver, which isn't that great in general. I thought I had another case where there was just one issue preventing this guy from perfection. But fortunately, the beautifully clear instructions let me know that it was gonna be okay. Complaint retracted. I love you. Those two metal flaps do an amazing job at keeping this waist sturdy. I know some people like to transform their figures without the instructions, but please, read a book. Front skirt moves up, side skirts move up. Another quick side story. The side skirts actually fold in mid-skirt for the transformation, but they're supposed to snap into place so they don't fold in when you're pushing it down. Unfortunately, not so the case with this one, until I fixed it. Folded that down, added a little bit of super glue to the edge, as you can see there, and now there's enough friction to snap it into place. A little bit of wiggle is left over, but you can't fix everything. Rotation at the leg, can't move back that far.
Beautiful square.
Thigh swivel, bend at the knee, up and down at the ankle, a toe that bends downwards, useless, and an ankle pivot. Not so useless. Posability is standard for the Transformers Masterpiece line, which is a pretty high standard. This guy is so fun to play with. And before we get into the size comparisons, I forgot an accessory. Plain plastic box that you can pop the lid off of, and that plugs into his chest. Recreates how he would produce breast milk. Pretty cool, but kind of boring. But there might be another use for this. Those were the good old days. I have a drinking problem. Size comparison time. Here's Figma Modic Economy, SH Monster Arts Godzilla, Transform Element OP Leader, my previous review, at least one of them, the SH Monster Arts Godzilla Ultima. Check out that video if you haven't, it's a triple review. Another third-party Transformer that stabbed me in the back, Deformation Space Crimson Wings, and the original Transformers Masterpiece MP13 Soundwave. Soundwave inferior, Acoustic Wave superior. And I thought the original was really good. This guy showed me that it could get better. And oh boy, does it ever. Let's get into the transformation. And if you were wondering, yes, the figure is still fully transformable with the replacement parts attached. Just makes it look thicker than it already is. And here we have the tape recorder mode. I know it may not look remarkable at first glance, but I am in paradise. This thing is amazing. Such a simple alternate mode that resulted from a satisfying and intuitive transformation. And there's no weird gap in the back. I love you, MP13, but you're obsolete. I absolutely love how this thing is just a box. A pretty much perfect box. Until you get to the bottom, but it's a rule of thumb that you don't look at the bottom of an alternate mode. It even has some interactive features, like an on switch and the volume control. Of course, the tape deck still works, but the face buttons aren't pushable. 0 out of 10. Something else that makes this thing so great. I love how hefty it feels. Obviously, it's the same weight as the robot mode, but in such a compact form. It just makes it oh so satisfying to hold. And I forgot to mention that the cassette also feels pretty hefty for its size, thanks to an abundance of die-cast metal. It is simply a box, I know that. But this figure, fully committed to the idea. Haters will say that it's too thick for a real tape recorder, but you probably don't even know what a tape recorder is. Shut up. It's a fine point this is unrealistically fat, but then again, what real tape recorder ever looked like Soundwave? Seriously, I honestly want to know. Leave it down in the comments. Everything tabs in nice and solidly. It's not gonna accidentally fall apart when you're... I don't know, how would you play with a tape recorder toy? And it's so amazing how tiny this guy got. Size comparison time again. Hey, here's Modica, Godzilla Prime, Crimson Wings. Still not gonna transform it because it takes 3 years, but I do recommend watching this stop motion transformation that helped me get used to it. Still not fun. And the Masterpiece Soundwave. Again, the Masterpiece Soundwave is not a bad figure at all, but I don't see any reason to get that when this thing exists. And since we have a little extra time, why don't we talk about the separately sold Cassetticons? You got Corvus, Laserbeak, Shadow, Ravage, and Firib. Frenzy? Rumble? Frumble? Each of these guys are packaged in their cases, and Firib here looks great, but is the exact same figure as Fibrier, so we're not even gonna cover this guy in depth. Really fun in both modes and has the same amount of accessories. But I should point out that the hip joints on my copy were extremely loose out of the box. Couldn't even stand up. So of course I got the white sticky stuff of your choice, put a little bit in there, and slowly worked the joints until they were tight enough to be considered fun. And now it is, of course. Get out of here. Let's talk about the rest of the cassettes. Little less convincing than the boys, but still passes fairly enough. Never mind. Of course, it can also fit into the tape deck. You can fit 2 cassettes maximum, which is just another play option. But of Corvus, this guy transforms. Let's do that real quick. Another fun little guy. Keep forgetting to mention these cassettes are made of die-cast metal, hefty for its size, looks amazing, and I appreciate the lack of parts forming. Slightly posable as well. You get a hinge joint. He looks up that far and looks down that far. And on his head, you can see a little tab there. If we... reveals a little NSA camera. The wings can move back and forth. Swivel here. Can move up and down. And a mid-wing hinge joint. Don't care if that sticker placement is wrong. It looks good. And the little legs are on a hinge joint and swivel at the feet. He's got holes at the bottom of his feet, which allows him to actually perch on top of the main figure. Pretty solidly, too. Not gonna go anywhere. He could even perch on the robot mode's arm. Thank God. If that feature wasn't there, I would cry. And our final cassette con, Shadow, the ultimate life form. The least convincing cassette of the set. Looks like a cat that got stuck in a hydraulic press. If you think that's funny, I'm calling the cops. Die-cast metal again. Let's transform it. The cat mode looks great. Could have easily been a flat fuck, but it actually filled out quite nicely. Just looks like a slender jaguar. Again, I don't care if the Decepticon sticker is in the wrong place. That was the closest I could get it to the original G1 cartoon. The only complaint I can make about the look is the tail. Looks less like a tail and more like projectile shit. The top of the head also has a tendency to disassemble, if you could see that there, so I just pushed that down. Might want to glue that later. And it's pretty cool that you get a ball joint at the head. Slight side to side. Every ball joint can be a slight swivel. Can't look up that far. More for the transformation, of course. course, and look down the... Oh, yeah. Easily attaches about the fuck. Might want to glue a lot of parts here. Mouth opens, rotation at the shoulder, can't move back that far. Bend at the elbow, hinge joint at the paw, no sort of midsection articulation, but that's okay. Ball joint at the hips, can't even move backwards and forwards. That ball joint allows for a rotation, a decent spread. Bend at the knee, or this would be the ankle, right? And a hinge joint at the foot, I mean the toe. Decent amount of articulation. I think what would really put it over the top though, if there was some ball joints at the shoulders. Highly recommend you get the Cassetticons, but it's not necessary to enjoy the main figure. If Takara ever decides to do a Masterpiece Soundwave 2.0, they're gonna have a rough time topping this guy. I might not even get it depending on how much of a mess the back is. The only thing really missing from this figure is a headphone jack. How am I gonna listen to my tunes? Heaven, I'm in heaven, and my heart beats so that I can hardly speak. And I seem to find the happiness I seek when we're out together dancing cheek to cheek. All these guys came with cards, by the way, forgot to mention that. Stats on the back and very thick too. Anyway, next review we'll be taking a look at another third party